Thank you so much, Centuries. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ann Lois Washington, and I'm one of the managers at the Early Childhood Initiatives Division. I'm so happy to be here today with you all, and I am proud to introduce Dr. Shelly Masur and Warr in their presentation, Resilient Futures, Integrating Climate Action into Early Childhood Services. Dr. Shelly Masur is a seasoned leader in education and health with over 20 years of experience as a nonprofit executive and former elected official. She currently serves as the ECE Vice President of Advisory and State Policy for the Low Income Investment Fund. Dee brings diverse experience from the education and public sectors. In her current role as Shine Child Care Facilities Fund Program Manager at LEAF, her main objective is improving early learning environments across Harris County. Now, I will turn it over to the LEAF team, and thank you so much, both.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Oh, great. You've got the slides. Awesome. I will try. I'm going to give a couple of caveats for today. First of all, I'm super happy to be here, so thank you so much for having us. We love to be talk about our work and how the intersection of climate and childcare makes a huge difference for families and what we can all do to mitigate that risk. Second, I'm going to say I flew in from California last night at midnight. So if I lose my words at any moment, I'll get them back, but it may just take me a second. And it's kind of an interesting day to be doing this, as most days are. But in particular, as I was flying in, I was, sort of scrolling through the news, and I saw epic storms all across the Midwest. My mom is in St. Louis, my son is in Austin. And I thought, okay, it's another one. I feel like we have those things every week now. These sort of once-in-a-lifetime storms are happening all the time. And y'all are experiencing them here in Harris County quite a bit, and that's one of the things we're gonna talk about today. So here's a little bit of an overview. I'll go over some research that we did in partnership with Dee and the Shine Fund, and then Dee will tell you a little bit more about the Shine Fund and how we're connecting the research to action here in Harris County. So as a team, we developed this framework for sort of thinking about how do we connect climate and early childhood, and how do we use data effectively to understand the impacts of climate risk on communities. So first, we take the data on climate risk, we connect it to indicators of data on climate risk and connect it to indicators of childcare. Then we think about outcomes and needs in different neighborhoods, and then we have some solutions and suggestions. So that's how we're gonna sort of progress through this. Some of you may have heard my now former colleague, which I'm always sad to say, Joe Fretwell, last year, who introduced the first part of this series. So if you did hear that last year, I'm gonna have a quick review, and then we'll go on to the final report that we literally just released last night. So, all right, so first let's talk about Harris County. Harris County is the single most at-risk county in the country for climate risk. So we used FEMA climate data where they developed a national risk index, and it identifies 18 different climate hazards. Throughout the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about National Risk Index Score, or FEMA Climate Risk, which is a calculation that combines natural hazards with social vulnerability indicators like socioeconomic status in order to assign a risk score to every census tract in the US. So you can see how widely this varies, but what it basically means is risk is the likelihood of a natural hazard event happening in a particular census tract, and the highest risks are seen in the dark shades of purple, and the lowest risks are seen in the white or pale blue. But I would say, as I look at this map, some of that storm that I was just talking about, that I was reading about, is happening right now in some of the white or light blue areas. So even within Harris County, we know It's the highest risk county in the country, but risk is not distributed evenly. It's not going to be a surprise, I don't think, to most people. You live it and you see it, and it's just kind of how we have come to understand what happens in different neighborhoods. So Harris County is an outlier, as I said. This map has all of the indicators and looks at the census tracts specifically in Harris County. You can see, like, we pulled out a couple of different census tracts. So you can see tract 31404 in pale blue. That has the lowest risk score in the county, which means it's just over 28% more likely to experience impacts of climate hazards. And then 343,700, everybody loves a good census tract score number. In dark purple, it has one of the highest risk scores in the county. And that is almost 100% more likely to experience impacts from climate hazards. So it's a massive difference for the people who live in these neighborhoods. So what we did to initiate this study is we took child care licensing data from the Texas Workforce Commission. We overlaid it on top of the FEMA National Risk Index map to see which risks are present around physical spaces where young children are spending their time, child care facilities. The box overlaid on the top of the map, right there, that black box right there, shows a concentration of child care facilities in an area of high climate risk. So you can see it pretty clearly. We know, and we've all experienced, that many homes and early care and education facilities are largely unequipped to withstand the impacts of a worsening climate. So an example is, and many of you may have lived this, 52 child care centers in Harris County permanently closed after Hurricane Harvey, if y'all remember that. So that's a quick overview, and if you want more information on that sort of whole section, that's in map 1. At the end of the presentation, I have some QR codes, and you can pull up each of the maps and go through them. There are 3 different story maps that tell the stories of Harris County. So the next part, and this is the second part of the framework that I talked about at the beginning, is where we identified areas for investment in Harris County. So we looked at different areas of the county. We did a whole assessment, which I'm going to show you in a second, and then we chose a few to provide some examples for you. So here's the framework. As I said, we took licensed child care capacity data. We added it to the FEMA National Risk Index score, and we connected these 2 sets of data so that you can see where those opportunities for investments are. What we did is called a bivariate analysis, which just simply means that we took 2 different variables, climate risk, child care supply, and overlaid them on top of each other. So it's a fairly complicated term for a fairly simple analysis of risk. Once we did that, we then assigned them risk scores. So we took all of the census tracts, we gave them a score, A1 to A9, and you can see at the bottom, hopefully you can see this, that the A1 is the lowest capacity, meaning the lowest number of child care spaces and the lowest risk. A7 is the highest capacity, highest number of child care spaces, but still low risk. And then on the other side is a low capacity, lowest number of child care spaces, but high risk. And then the most significant one is this A9, which is the high capacity, most number of spaces, and the highest risk. So you'll see that on the maps as we go through. And then there's some variables that are more moderate in between. So here's all of Harris County with the 2 variables overlaid with each other. You can see that A1, which is low capacity, low risk, has the highest number of providers that accept subsidies. However, that means there's a low availability in those areas. The highest climate risk areas are where the greatest concentration of providers who accept subsidies sit. So those A9 sections. So the dark blue bars show the county census tracts in each of the designations, A1 through A9, and that these 9 categories all describe the climate risk. The light blue bars show the county census tracts that are only providers who accept subsidies. So you can get a sense of how that all works. All right, so as I said, we pulled out a few different neighborhood clusters so that we could think about what does it look like in different neighborhoods and what are some opportunities for investment. So the first neighborhood we looked at was the Midtown neighborhood, and what we saw was that it is both low risk and low capacity, particularly for subsidy providers. It has a high capacity when you're looking at full pay, but when you look at subsidy providers, it's there's quite a low access in this community. That would point to a particular set of policy interventions, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Then we look at the Northwest County. In this one, we're seeing, obviously, as you can tell, high climate risk. Of the 30 tracts in this cluster, over 50% receive that A9 designation, the one that's the high risk and high capacity designation. That means that we need to think about how are we protecting the providers and the kids who work there, who live there, from climate risk. We know that in this part of the county, there's a huge amount of population growth, and often when that happens, they're building in a way that doesn't take into account climate risk, which can indeed increase the risk. So we're talking about increased, often pavement, lack of trees. In this particular area, we know that there are certain challenges that we would want to think about, and which I'll talk about in just a minute. I will say that you can see that most of the programs in this cluster do accept child care subsidy payments. All right, and then we'll look at East Houston. We have one small pocket of A9, that high supply and high risk in East Houston, closer to downtown, but it mostly receives that A3 and A6, so in the middle, relatively little supply, but big climate risks. And I'll talk about, I've just sort of provided an overview, but I'm going to tell you exactly what the climate risks are in each of these designations in just a minute. Okay. All right. So this is the part where we get to the solutions. We'll start with Midtown. So in Midtown, we know that there's high home prices, there's relatively low climate risk. That NRI score that I talked about, that risk score, is 64%. So compared to the overall risk of Harris County, it's a pretty low risk. It has 1.6 licensed child care seats for every child under 5 living in this area. However, as I said before, there's very few subsidy accepting seats in there. So we know that it's catering to a particular set of families in the Midtown cluster. So one of the recommendations we have is co-locating childcare with affordable housing as the county thinks about building out housing in this area. So Harris County, as you probably all know, has a strategic plan. Strategic plan goal 3 is to make Harris County's economy more inclusive. So one way you do that is by building affordable housing so that families can live in different areas. So when we support the development of mixed income neighborhoods, we support a more inclusive economy. So our recommendation for this section is build more housing, build more affordable housing, and include child care within that housing. Next one, going back to Northwest. The second goal of the strategic plan is to connect communities of Harris County with safe, reliable, equitably distributed, and well-maintained infrastructure. So that really calls for investment in public infrastructure. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about sidewalks, I'm talking about protecting people from floods, and I'm talking about ways to get around that don't require you to get in your car. So we know that the risk here in Northwest County is river flooding. If you look at the map, it'll say riverine, but that's what they mean. They mean the river floods frequently, and the risk of the river flooding is quite high. So we recommend that the county look at flood mitigation strategies in this area. So you can do things like put in heat reflective surfaces, you can put in trees, and what are called green and blue zones, and those are zones that help reduce heat and also protect the area when there's flooding. What you see right here is called a bioswale, and what a bioswale does is it's a natural sort of filtration and water capture space so that when floods do happen, the water goes there and it filtrates back into the ground. It also helps address polluted water so that the pollution is filtered out as well. All right, back to East Houston. So in this set of census tracts, on average, the heat is I'm going to be very exact because my team gave me some exact numbers, 8.1 to 8.6 degrees warmer than the surrounding areas. And if you think about that, especially on hot days, that's really a lot warmer. So nationwide, that means that this area is known as a heat island, which means it's just a hot place, basically, right? So nationwide, urban heat islands, so I told you I'd get my words back in just a second, that affect people of color specifically due to historic redlining and the way that we've built communities and excluded communities of color from investment. So what we want in areas like this is infrastructure investments that mitigate extreme heat. So talking about permanent shade structures, including trees. I talked a minute ago about heat reflective surfaces, so you would want to put heat reflective surfaces. That means like not asphalt, not blacktop, that you have surfaces that don't absorb heat, but they reflect it back up. And then things like solar-powered air conditioners for homes, and those types of mitigations can help community spaces be better prepared for the harsh conditions of Texas summers. All right, I'm gonna turn it over to Dee now. Before I turn it over to Dee, I just wanted to see if anybody, because I went through that pretty rapidly, I wanted to see if anybody has any questions or comments, or I can wait till after Dee talks about the Shine Fund. You wanna hear about the Shine Fund? Me too. All right, Dee.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelly. So I'll be honest, I'm a little bit nervous being able to present in front of all these amazing advocates, especially for early childhood education. But I'm here and I will do my best. So a couple of days ago, I had lunch or an early dinner with some colleagues, and we were talking about something completely unrelated to this. And I said something like, yeah, that's my lived experience. I just get through it, do what I have to do, and keep it pushing. And my colleague said, yeah, it's okay. Like, yeah, we should be resilient, but that doesn't mean that we should wait around and not take action, knowing that something is gonna happen. And that's when I thought, that is so in alignment with what we are going to talk about today. Because as people that live in the greater Houston area, as people that live in Harris County, we know that when it rains, it's gonna flood. We know that when there's a breeze, the power is going to go out. We know that it is hot. It is hot in Harris County. That is our lived experience. And what do? We roll with the punches. We pick ourselves up by our bootstraps, and we recover. We keep it pushing. But when it comes to addressing the climate risk, we should shift our mindset just a little bit. Not even just a little bit. We should shift our mindset from less reactionary to being more proactive. And so Shelly talked a little bit about how Harris County can be proactive in alignment with the strategic plan. I want to talk about how Harris County is being proactive now in ECE. And that is through the Shine Child Care Facilities Fund, Shine Child Care Facilities Fund is a collaboration between Harris County, the Low Income Investment Fund, and Volunteers of America, Texas. What we do is provide repair and renovation grants to child care homes and child care centers across the county. So child care homes can receive a grant award of up to $40,000, and child care centers can receive a grant award of up to $400,000. And our focus for this program is to increase access to high quality, safe, and nurturing learning environments for the children and families across the county. And so let's put some numbers behind that. Let's put some investment behind that. In an unprecedented move, at least in the state of Texas, the county has committed $13.7 million that will impact 75 to 100 child care centers and homes in Harris County. This is about 2,800 child care slots that will be impacted. And so when we were thinking about the design of this program, we recognized that there are thousands of child care centers across Harris County. And yes, $13.7 million is a lot of dollars, but it's not enough to address the thousands of child care centers that need renovation or repair. And so we wanted to be able to prioritize which centers are able to move forward with this funding. And so we had two categories. That is the social impact category as well as project readiness. And so for our social impact priority category, we looked at things like their SVI, whether or not the program is located in a child care desert, whether or not the program is located within a subsidy desert, does the program offer any specialized services, and most relevant to what we are talking about today, is that program looking to address a safety, health, disaster, climate mitigation need? And once we identified which programs were able to move forward through thousands of hours of technical assistance, we worked with them to make sure that their project scopes align with a sustainable and resilient program. And so out of approximately 400 pre-applications, 322 of those projects were looking to address health, safety, disaster, or climate concerns. And of course, this isn't surprising. Like I said, hot, flooding, power outages, and if you guys saw Joe's last presentation, about 95% of our county is high risk for, in terms of climate. 95%, that's basically everybody. So again, shouldn't come as a surprise, and so it also shouldn't come as a surprise that the projects that we selected to move forward for our priority cohort, all of them are addressing a health, safety, or climate resiliency need. And so just a couple of examples of what those projects are. So you'll see here in the image on the top left, this is a provider that was impacted by flooding. You see some splintered wood. This is a safety and a security concern for this provider. And so we are working with the provider to mitigate not only the flooding, but also to repair the door and other areas of their home that have been affected. Similarly, we have some leaking in the ceiling, and this is because of damage to the roof. We know that we are impacted by storms often, whether it's a freeze that happens out of nowhere or just, a hurricane. Hurricane season is prevalent here. And so what we do is work with them to repair or replace the roof. On the bottom right, you see that this provider is looking for more permanent shade structure because it's hot. But we don't want our youngest learners inside all day. We need them outside. We need them to get active. We need to improve upon those gross motor skills. And so how can we help to mitigate that heat risk and also make sure that our children are getting what they need, and that is through permanent shade structure. And then on the bottom left, this provider is dealing with standing water anytime it rains. It doesn't have to be heavy rain, it's just anytime it rains. We know that we have a drainage issue here in Houston, and so what we're doing with this provider is working with them to improve drainage. And Shelly has offered a couple of examples earlier of how we can address that. But across the board, across Harris County, we need to consider how we can remedy flooding. And so these are just a couple of examples of how SHINE is working to mitigate the climate risk. And so I just want to leave with this closing remark. Our priority cohort consists of 84 child care providers. So 84 child care homes and centers. And just for the sake of argument, let's say their license capacity is 12. Now, let's do a 12-month multiplier to that. So 84 child care providers, license capacity of 12, and 12 months. That is an impact in addressing the climate risk for 12,096 children and families annually through the work of the SHINE Fund. And again, we just use the license capacity for a licensed child care home, not even considering that for centers, they can have an enrollment or a license capacity of 200 or 300 plus. That is Harris County being resilient. That is Harris County being proactive. That is impact. And so I just leave you with this final thought. Imagine if we were able to have this sort of impact on child care centers across the county through a child care facilities fund like SHINE.
So these are the 3 maps, if you want to pull them up. But I also just wanted to say something about the photos that Dee just showed, because those photos are here in Harris County, but I will tell you across the country, those are the same kinds of issues that providers are dealing with, no matter what their risk is. In California, we have wildfire risk, we have huge rainstorms, we have mudslides. Here in Harris County, you have heat, you have hurricanes, you have tornadoes. There's all kinds of different risk across the country. And so I didn't introduce the Low-Income Investment Fund, but I will quickly tell you, we're a national organization that invests in communities that have been systemically disinvested in. And we do that by investing in affordable housing and child care facilities. So we're super excited to be partnering with Harris County. It's a really unique opportunity to make a difference for, that Dee just showed you, for child care providers who are working in those conditions every day, as well as the kids and families who are there for early care and learning. So do we have time for questions? Okay. Any questions or comments? Things we should think about? I will say we also surveyed, we didn't show it in this presentation, but we surveyed providers to ask them their needs. And so if you look at the first presentation, the first map, you'll see the different areas of climate risk that providers have said they're trying to identify and mitigate. Oh, sorry.
Oh, we have a question. Don't be shy, y'all. Ask.
Great presentations. Thank you so much. I was wondering, because I'm a big proponent of inclusion, how we can get certain neighborhoods to be accepting of the low-income families so that everyone is in the same area, not just those who can necessarily afford to be in that area. Because I know that it's the not in my backyard mentality that makes it really challenging. And it was great presentations. Thank you.
Well, I'll say a couple things. First of all, you have an affordable housing person here, so I'm sure he'll be speaking to some issues like that as well. Second, I'm a former city council member, and we had a lot of that in my town. We were doing a lot to build more multifamily affordable housing across our city, and we definitely had a ton of pushback from communities who did not want multifamily. It was going to, quote, ruin their neighborhood. I think one of the things you hear a lot is neighborhood character. Like it's, right, am I right, August? Neighborhood character, you're ruining the neighborhood character. So in some instances, you need leaders who are just willing to go ahead and take action because they know it's the right thing to do. In some instances, I think there are opportunities to work with communities and remind them that all of us want the same things for our kids and for ourselves. Everybody wants a safe place to live. It's a basic human need. Everybody wants healthy food for their children and for themselves, and everybody wants to raise their families in a place where they feel safe and secure. I was just looking at some data from another study we're doing in New Mexico, and the number 2 reason families chose the childcare they chose was because it was in a safe neighborhood. And so all of those things, we have to, it's, for those of us who are advocates, it's on us to remind other people who are the sort of NIMBY people that you referenced, we're all in this together. And by sort of portioning off people, it's not going to make anyone's life better. It's not, I mean, I say this like it's easy. I know it's not easy, but it's just a mantra to keep reminding ourselves. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Hi, thanks again for your presentations. I was curious on if you could talk a little bit more about how the 9 capacity and climate risk factors are going to impact the work of the early childhood education movement, like how it will be integrated to the current programs that exist.
You want to talk about Shine?
So in the preliminary stages of Shine, we had not yet had that bivariate analysis. And so again, we really wanted to include within our priorities, something that is addressing climate. But moving forward, as we start to look at other facilities funds and possibilities across ECE, we want to be intentional about what the data shows. We want to be intentional about addressing, capacity versus the risk. So again, if it is an A9 area, I wish I could go back and show how we are going to, I am going to go back and show.
Do it. That one, yeah.
Yeah, so if it is an A9 area, this is a priority for climate mitigation and disaster relief. And so it's not just putting a Band-Aid on it, as we have seen. It is really being intentional about the work that we do. So if it is a roof repair, what type of sealant are we going to place in order to ensure that the shingles don't fall off the next time there is a natural disaster? Do you want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't focus on the content in these, but I can just quickly review it. So to Dee's point, when you have that high risk and high capacity, that's where you're looking at the mitigation strategies that we talked about. If you've got low capacity and high risk, then you both want to keep the supply that's there, build new supply, but you also want to make sure that when you're building new supply, that it is really taking into account the type of climate risk that is present in that neighborhood, whether it's flooding or heat, whatever that is. In this low capacity, low risk, that's where we want to build new supply of childcare, and we really would encourage the county to focus on those areas where they can build up supply of childcare in areas of low risk. And then the last one, where we have high capacity and low risk, we just want to make sure that there's equitable access, right? So that's sort of the Midtown neighborhood that I talked about. We know that there's, as I mentioned already, there's high capacity, but it's expensive. And so we want to make sure that there are investments in bringing in providers who accept subsidy payments and building housing that makes it possible for families to live in those communities. On average, across the country, within urban areas, families will only travel about 3.5 miles to get to care. In sort of the more rural areas, they'll travel 10 miles or more, as you can imagine, because they just need to. But in this area, think about traffic, think about all the different things that families have to consider when they're choosing care. So how can we build care that's either close to their homes or close to their work? Typically, families will choose care that's close to their home. So building housing and building childcare in the same spaces is a way to encourage addressing both of those issues. So part of it is advocacy. Part of the reason we are telling y'all about this is we need your help to think about how do we work with the county to help them invest in the areas where they need investment. How do we build on their strategic plan that really identifies a set of key issues that I think we would all be supportive of and help them see how that applies to early childhood. Does that answer your question?
I mean, it is directly like through our technical assistance, right? So like I shared before, we didn't have this framework when we were establishing Shine, but through our technical assistance with the providers, we are going in on these site visits and we are taking a look at what the issues are. And honestly, the most prevalent issues are related to flooding, heat mitigation, and then how can they remain open during a natural disaster? And so when we are meeting with them one-on-one, we're talking to them about ways that they can mitigate those risks. Every provider has a different need depending on the cluster, the neighborhood that they are located in. We are in the Northwest area. We know that Northwest area floods a lot. If you start moving more coastal, then you know that's an area where it's gonna flood. And then we are all experiencing heat. And so a lot of the conversation that we're having with the providers within Shine are implementing shade structures. How can we use the natural shading that is already in place in order to get the children outside? What sort of generators can we use that are going to sustain throughout a natural disaster, because families still have to go to work and they need childcare for their children. So things along those lines. It is directly related to the technical assistance in order to meet the need of the childcare provider while also considering like climate risk. Does that help? Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say, I'll just share with you that LIF has, in the last several years, really had a focus on climate and climate risk. Part of that is because several of us have had personal experiences with the impacts. And I'll just share a story from my boss, who is in Riverside County, California, which is kind of desert. If you've ever been there, you know what I'm talking about. It's basically desert and very flat, very, very, very hot. It was 106 degrees. And the kids couldn't go out. She put her hand on the play equipment that was outside, and it was too hot to touch. So to Dee's point, thinking about not only the sort of fixed infrastructure like roofs and other pieces and doors, you're also thinking about what is the play equipment that's available. What is that play yard? That play yard that you saw that was basically concrete. How do you build in some natural elements so that it's protecting, it's nicer for the kids to be in, first of all, and second of all, it's protecting against the flooding that Dee identified, and it's also helping cool. So our team has been working hard across the country to incorporate these types of recommendations for providers. And so we're excited to be able to bring some of those pieces here to Harris County as well.
So thank you, Shelly. We have another question.
Okay.
here.
And then after that one, we have an online question as well.
Exciting.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for what you presented. I have two questions. I'm that guy, so bear with me. The first one is when we're talking about like building communities, especially for our folks who've been like historically underserved. One of the questions I heard like solar and mentioning things like that. Have we thought about consideration of like LEED type buildings, like things that are really energy efficient? So if we're living in, I think you said East Houston where it's really hot, that the air conditioning, the solar that we have that's providing the cooling is not escaping. So that's one, like, is there something where like we're looking a little bit more to like solve those problems? The other one is about like the community where we have like mixed income. And so one of the things I think is the first barrier is access, right? To be able to get in there. The second one is maintenance. And I'm trying to figure out like what conversations have we had around like how do we help people be able to stay in their houses? Because like when I bought my house, I got this long list of things that I should do. I'm probably about 40%, give or take a 5% or something like that. So I'm just trying to figure out how does that work out?
Yeah, well, maybe I can tackle the first question. Indeed, you want to talk a little bit about the support we provide to providers around maintenance?
Yeah.
So in terms of installing and building facilities that are climate neutral or even climate positive, certainly that's something we like to invest in. I will say that LIF had, I don't know how many of y'all heard about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which was federal dollars that were supposed to go to communities across the country to help build buildings like that. And for LIF, we had applied to be part of that. It's now in litigation. The feds have pulled it back. So we'll see what happens with that. But thinking about, we are part of groups that are thinking about how do you build in a way that both protects the people who are living in the spaces or working in the spaces, and also is better for the climate. So it's a great question, and when we advise providers, we try and bring in some of those elements. Even if they're just repairing or renovating a space, we think about things like solar. How do you access it? You talked about generators, like how do you get a solar powered generator, for example? So do you want to talk about maintenance?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main reasons that Shine came to fruition is typically when we're thinking about childcare, there's emphasis on curriculum, training up our teachers, and the renovation or repair of the facility is one of the last things on the childcare provider's mind. And so when we go in to provide technical assistance, as I said, it is very intentional and strategic. And so when we are meeting with them, it is not just to place a Band-Aid on the repair. We're talking about solutions that are going to be long-term in order for them to maintain just the overall quality. In addition to that, we are talking with them about ways that they can incorporate natural materials that will help to just improve the overall maintenance. We know that this is not just a one-off conversation to have with them through our technical assistance. This is ongoing. And sometimes we have providers that, through LIF, that we have worked with and they have funded and they have projects, and they come back to us with questions later just about, I'm experiencing this, this issue, how would you recommend that I mitigate that to move forward? And our recommendation is a strong investment up front for a long-term manageable solution for the future.
Do we have an online question?
Yes, you sure do. And that online question is Shine still taking applications?
Unfortunately, no, we are not taking applications.
Every place where we've had a facilities fund like this, it has been well oversubscribed. And we always have more need than we have available dollars. And so also, as you think about advocacy, it's a good place to, for communities to invest in the infrastructure of childcare, and the facilities piece, to Dee's point, is often the piece that is left to the side. So we're super grateful to Harris County for investing in childcare infrastructure.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We have one final question.
Thank you. As y'all were talking about the role of just like health and safety too, as this plays into climate change, did y'all consider like the interconnectivity of air pollution and then how that relates? Because I know you briefly chatted about greenhouse emissions and all of those things, but I'm very curious because all of those zones y'all highlighted are very highly polluted areas too, and I know that has a role with outside play and everything else. So,
Yeah, absolutely. In some of the places where we've done studies, we've actually taken in air quality meters when we're going in and visiting sites to just sort of see the indoor air quality and measure the outdoor air quality. I mentioned I live in California now, and it's something we think about a lot because we have wildfires now actually most of the year, and so the air quality is terrible. And you're right that in particular, communities, the urban heat islands are also very much tied to poor air quality, particularly communities that have been surrounded by interstates, where the emissions from the cars and the trucks that are driving by constantly all day long, there's noise pollution and there's air pollution. So for us, we would think about strategies that people can take in their communities and how communities can also invest. Honestly, trees are the best investment. They last, generally, and they clean the air and they lower the heat. So we're huge proponents of that. But we also, for many places, will recommend air purifiers for indoor air quality. And then think about what can we do as we look at the outdoor built environment to improve air quality so kids can be outside, because we don't, of course, want them inside all day.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback off of that, LIFT is currently in partnership with a local environment organization who is going into childcare centers, and they are looking for centers as we speak to provide them with air purifiers in order to really have research and testing to back that, we need this improved air quality. And so just based on that research, they're going to compare the results, and hopefully we're able to move forward with additional funding to get funding to improve air quality outdoors as well.
Okay, we have 1 minute left. Any final question? Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Shelly, Masur, and Dee. Thank you so much for this impactful presentation.
Thank you for having us. We're really grateful to be here today.